I have started The Grace of Wild Things by Heather Fawcett. I love Heather Fawcett. She really is shaping up to be one of my favorite modern authors. So I went ahead and picked up this Anne of Green Gables inspired middle grade story. I am about halfway through and it is so darling. So in this we follow Grace. Grace is an orphan, of course, Grace with an E. She has run away from an orphanage. She has heard about this witch that is in these enchanted woods that has eaten children in the past. And she recognizes her own skills and knows that she is a witch at heart. And she is hoping that if she finds this witch in these enchanted woods, that this witch can then teach her and show her witchy ways. Grace finds the witch's cottage and promptly ends up being in the witch's oven. Something that I love about this is that so far there are still connections within this book of Anne of Green Gables, but it is so very autumn vibey with the witch and the spells and a grimoire and a familiar. And so it just feels so perfect for this time of year. So this is set in late summer. In this late season, it's about August, when Grace makes a deal with the witch that she has adopted, that she must learn all of the spells in the witch's grimoire by the following May or June. And so we have nods to Anne of Green Gables in the characters, in some of the things that are happening, in the name of the teacher, in the breaking of a slate overhead. We have our Gilbert, we have our Diana, we have our Josie Pye. It just so far is just really shaping up to be this sweet but a little bit dark middle grade novel. Something that I have really kind of been feeling since starting this is this urge to bake. We talk a lot about food in here and tarts and things like that. And so I decided a perfect end of the season dessert is something with peaches. So I went ahead and made a pie. Now, while making that pie, I realized I needed a book to listen to. And I don't have this on audiobook, but what I do have is The Maid and the Crocodile by Jordan Ifueko, who is the author of the Ray Bearer and Redemptor duology, which is a West African tale that I love so much. I actually have signed copies of it. One of my favorite young adult novels. This one, The Maid and the Crocodile, is set in that same world, but it is supposed to be Howl's Moving Castle inspired. And so I went ahead and started that. And in that we follow Small Shade. She has a disfigurement on her foot. So I love the disability rep in this novel. She had an accident as a child and ended up injuring her foot, and so she has a cane. She has to keep her foot wrapped, and her skills are cleaning. Within that West African folklore inspiration, we also have gods that are involved. She also has a skill of being able to eat someone's curse. So as someone sins, with that cleaning thread of her skill level, not just cleaning actual surfaces, but she's able to help clean and cleanse people's sins through eating their sins. And so she has the ability to sing, which then brings those sins to the forefront. The person needs to confess them, and then she is able to eat them. It's a curse eater. It sounds awful, and it really is awful. We're learning through her doing that her story. This is a standalone fantasy novel, but it is, as I said, set in Ray Bearer Redemptor world. And I do think that there are spoilers in that. And I would recommend that if you have any desire to read any of her works, you may want to read those two first. As Shade is giving an offering to a god, she accidentally includes a part of her hair with the bead that she offers. And by giving a part of her body, it bonds her directly to the god to whom she was giving an offering, which happens to be a crocodile god. And so she comes into contact with him and really discovers his humanity. As we are living in the present times, we are just seeing the past stories and how they weave into creating the people that we are in the present. I do see the Howl's Moving Castle inspiration. The crocodile god lives in this incredible estate mansion that has different doors that open up into different areas. And he can kind of control where those doors open up. And it really is an enchanted house and an enchanted setting. And so far, I love it so much. I have finished The Grace of Wild Things by Heather Fawcett. This book is so heartwarming and cozy, and Heather Fawcett does such a good job of handling very deep topics and some pretty sad occurrences that happen in her plots with this blanket of coziness that just helps you to feel very heartwarmed despite reading things that may be, under normal circumstances, pretty difficult to read. Grace does a phenomenal job of collecting like a quilt work of quirky friends. And so that found family trope is very strongly exhibited in this and done so well. In this, we have Rum, who the name is a nod to Rumpelstiltskin, who's a fairy that Grace comes into contact with. But all the other human children in Grace's life do not remember him once he leaves whatever experience they're having. And so it's so funny how she's like, has to explain again who Rum is to her friends. And I do love how Heather Fawcett keeps humor in the story. Again, even though we're handling some pretty difficult topics and heavy topics. So there's humor, there's warmth, there is misunderstandings with the townspeople. And again, it very loosely is inspired by Anne of Green Gables, but if you've read that or even watched the Megan Follows series, you will see some of that happening in through here. Heather Fawcett is really the queen of cozy writing. And so again, even though we're dealing with some pretty intense themes in this, it just has this sense of feeling cozy. So I'm not really big on giving star ratings, but so far this is going to land into one of my top favorite books for this year. As I mentioned, while I was reading The Grace of Wild Things, I started listening to The Maid and the Crocodile. I loved it so much. I might actually have loved it more than the Ray Bearer duology. I just thought it was so phenomenal. So at the heart of The Maid and the Crocodile is workers' rights. And Jordan Fueko has said that it was inspired by the pandemic and all of those workers who had to continue to go in even when a lot of other businesses had shut down. And they were the people that were really holding up society, the hospital workers, the cleaning staff in these medical facilities. Those workers were required to go in a situation where a lot of people were fearful in the very beginning, and that really inspired this. She also did have this beautiful overlay of Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones that you could really sense in this novel as well. But that workers' rights and then additionally human rights was such a strong theme in this. And I loved the arc of Sade, who was the main female character, and how she went through struggles from experiences that she had had. We had disability representation as well. And she really grew into her voice and her own agency. And it just was so beautiful to read. It was very wholesome. You know, there were difficult things, like I mentioned when I had first read the first half of the book about the curse eating. That part is unsavory, literally and figuratively. And I just think that Jordan Fueko did such a beautiful job with a lot of class to handle some very gritty subjects in a way that was not very jarring. There are definitely off-page trigger warnings, but she just handled it so well. I loved it. The Maid in the Crocodile also at this point is one of my top favorite books in 2024. I love the West African folklore feel, but the rawness of life and what it is like to be one of the small people, and how you really can experience that abuse of power when you're in those positions. Phenomenal book. Highly recommend the audio version to that. And now I move on to the next book that I want to read. It is currently in the 40s and there's leaves that are falling, and I am just so in my element. I am halfway through Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranek. This is marketed as an ode to the wild woods of Poland, and it really does a great job of giving an ode to wild woods. Reading just this first half has really inspired me to get out into the woods, and the descriptions that A.B. Poranek gives of the woods, and in this case, this is a woods that is pretty perilous and creepy, are just so tactile. You really can feel what it's like to be in these woods. So in this, we follow Liska. Liska is a village girl who has magic. It reminds me so very much of The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. In the view of the church in the village of this young girl's magical powers. There's something to be feared, there's something to be squashed, and she really believes that. She is a girl of faith and really believes that her inherent abilities are not meant for good. And so she decides to escape into these wild woods, the Driada, which is a dangerous place full of demons and monsters. And she goes in looking for the Leski. And the Leski is the warden of the woods. And you can see he's got stag crowns. That is the form that he comes to her when she is in the woods for the first time, is as this stag. And they strike a bargain. And the bargain is if she serves him for 1 year, in his enchanted crumbling mansion, then he will take her magic from her because she really sees it as something that has only caused pain in her life. We're not really sure at this point what the direct pain is. You really only get that until right where I am in the middle, but you understand that it is a source of pain for her. We have village people in the surrounding village, and we learn that the warden of the wood is, as we would expect, not bad, right? He's really there to kind of hold back those evil forces in the wood and protect humans. This also reminds me of For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. This is so very much a Beauty and the Beast feeling stories. It also reminds me of Uprooted by Naomi Novik. And I say all of this not to really just keep saying, well, if you've read those, you don't need to read this. This has a different flair to it. Liska is a different person than a lot of those other characters, and I do love very much the way that the wood is portrayed and her powers are. I love the magic system that is within that, but his blood does run as tree sap, which again is very similar to For the Wolf. So I'm really enjoying this. It's a perfect book to read at dusk and really get into that creepiness. I have really been enjoying this, and it's a pretty fast read, and so I would expect that I will be finishing this soon and coming back to you and letting you know my final thoughts. I have just finished Where the Dark Stands Still. This is, at this point, one of my favorite books that I have read yet this year. And the thing that I sometimes wonder is, yes, it's absolutely the writing, it is the plot structure, it is the character development and the character arc. But I also do think that I am an experiential reader. And so the more I'm building life experiences and memories around my reading experience, the more connected I feel to the story, the more I feel like I'm immersed in it and really grasping what it is that the author is trying to exude in the word choices that they make and the stylistic sentence structure that they create and all of that. And so I do love this. I do love that I read this so much in the woods while reading about the Driada Woods. Something that I loved is that not only are you immersed in the woods and the mansion and how the forest really has its own entity, she also has this beginning in Midsummer's Night. And so there's this idea of how the seasons flow, and then there's this sort of climax as we get to All Souls Day, which is in November. So it just really does kind of have this cyclical feeling with regards to nature, which I love. It does really follow Beauty and the Beast, in my opinion, not super structured as we've seen in some of the other retellings, but it does really kind of follow that theme. There's a slight bit of Howl's Moving Castle with being able to move to different places that is kind of intriguing. And then of course you have this like eccentric wizard and this young girl who is kind of trying to unpack the complexities around that wizard. I love how this author wraps everything within nature. I love how the wizard didn't have blood. He had tree sap in his body. I did really like the Liska, the female main character in this, more than the female characters of the other books that I've said that this is like. I just really liked her strength of character and her very curious mind. She was always kind of inquiring instead of just accepting certain things that were happening. I connected better with the female main character. For the male character, I felt like he was maybe a little bit less reachable or, more difficult to understand what was going on. And that was intentional. I mean, we really were not supposed to understand fully the deal that Liska had gotten herself into as she was like slowly trying to uncover what was going on. It was an intriguing storyline. I loved the house and how the house under the rowan tree was its own character as well. I loved the other characters. I love how we learned a lot about Slavic folklore and all of the different, how you would have like house goblins, for instance, who would be cleaning, and just kind of how you have all of those cultural aspects that were put into this story. I love how the names were specifically oriented to kind of the purpose of the character. I hope I've given you some ideas on books that you can read during that summer to fall transition period. If you have any books to recommend, please feel free to leave those below. And thanks so much for watching. Until next time. Okay, do you want to go inside and find the kids? Come on.